football? I thought this was a motoring show. We'll explain this week on Motoring 2006.
TSN's Motoring 2006 is brought to you by the new Q from Quaker State. Unleash all your horses. And Michelin, a better way forward.
Montreal, in the summertime, one of the most beautiful cities in the country. And once a year, Montreal gets hot. I mean, real hot, when the Formula One crowd comes to town for the Canadian Grand Prix. It's a time for many to dream of getting behind the wheel of one of these high-speed go-karts. But you know, that's a fantasy, and alas, this program is about reality. We're not here for the Grand Prix. We are here to check out the newest member to the Acura family. They call it the RDX, and it belongs to the segment known as the crossover utility vehicle, or as Jim likes to call them, station wagons. The RDX has been a work in progress since 1999, and for Acura, it is the first gasoline turbo ever in North America. And Acura is convinced that the RDX is not out of place, even in this car-crazy city of Montreal.
Comparing it to the MDX, we had to make something different than the MDX. The MDX has a V6, it's got 7-seat vehicle, so it's great for what it is. But we wanted to make something different, so we went a completely different route. We made it an urban SUV is what our concept was. We wanted something different than the V6, so that's another reason for the turbo. It's only a 5-seater, it's less expensive, so we wanted to differentiate it from the MDX and yet make its own mark, not make a baby MDX, make something more sporty, more personal, a little bit less family oriented. We kind of try to call it the Acura SUV TSX.
The running back inspiration is because it's an SUV, you want kind of a more rugged guy maybe. So we thought football player, and obviously the quarterback is maybe not as agile. Some are, some aren't, but the running back is definitely, he can catch, he can throw, he can pass. He can run, he can block, he can do everything. So the running back had the agility, but he also had the toughness and the ruggedness, which lends itself to the styling from the kind of the shoulder pad feel, like it's clad in this protection, but it's still nimble and quick.
The styling is pleasing, although I find the front a little busy for me. The grille and the various air intakes, it seems a little fussy for me, but overall the lines are very clean and it seems understated in an Acura way.
It's a 2.3 liter turbocharged iVTEC engine, so it's got great performance. It's a good balance between performance, fuel economy, and emissions. We also have the SHAWD four-wheel drive system to give it great handling in the corners. So it handles like a sports sedan, and yet we've got the utility of a small CUV or small SUV.
Acura is launching worldwide. I think they're going into China this year, and they're going to be starting to sell cars in Japan in 2008. And what this vehicle does is it kind of completes the product line for them. They have now an entry-level sedan, a mid-range sedan, and a high-end sedan, and now they have two SUVs, one for the sort of more entry-level buyer and one for a more higher-end luxury buyer.
The seats, I think, are worth a special mention. The seats are fabulous in this thing. They hold you right in there, but they're really comfortable as well.
The turbocharged engine takes a little bit of getting used to because it doesn't make the noises and doesn't have the feel that you would expect of a Honda Acura engine. There's almost no turbo lag, and it's really, really flexible. You can lug it around town at low speeds, or you can be out on the highway and there's always passing power. So, once you get over the fact that it's not a high-revving Acura sort of engine, it's quite nice to live with.
The pricing on the vehicle, they haven't announced it, mid-40s, and I'm interested to see what that's going to come in at. You know, Mazda's just brought out an interesting similar type of vehicle called the CX-7. It's in the low to mid-30s. So I think Acura, even though it's a luxury brand, they got to be cognizant of this.
Sales, of course, are a big part of it, but if you keep going into the same market, I don't think it's a great sales success. So we're trying to create something new, something exciting, something that fits in the brand, and also that hits a little bit of different market than some of our other vehicles. So there's a lot of different ways to gauge success.
There's nothing wrong with being a bean counter, as long as you're in the bean business. More later on Kenzie's Corner.
You know, if GM has a nasty habit, it is that they launch cars that have got a ton of potential and promise, but in the long run, somehow never quite seem to live up to expectation. This week on Test Drive, we take a look at the G6 GTP Hardtop Convertible. Will this Pontiac be the latest to flourish, or will it flop? Over the past few years, convertible sales have been steadily growing, almost as quickly as the number of models now offered. The reason is not difficult to grasp. The Canadian population is aging and discretionary income is on the rise. Of course, if you're going to treat yourself to a new car, few are as rewarding to drive as a sporty convertible. When the sun shines and the top is folded down, a challenging ribbon of tarmac, or a pylon course, becomes a thing of beauty. You know, the most difficult thing about turning a coupe into a convertible is putting the strength back into the body that the roof once gave the car. If it's not done properly, you end up with a vehicle that shakes and shimmies like some deranged go-go dancer whenever the pavement becomes broken or rutted. With this car, GM have done a bang-up job, because this G6, well, it's as tight as a nut and almost completely devoid of cowl shake. Of course, the fact the G6 picks up the platform used by the Saab 9-3 and Chevy Malibu does not hurt the cause. The chassis also gives the sport-tuned suspension. McPherson struts up front, a multiple link design in rear and anti-roll bars at both ends, a decent base, and so body roll is controlled, understeer is benign, and the feedback the car delivers to the driver is predictable and reassuring. With the suspension hunkered down through the pylons, the G6 GTP put its best 18-inch wheel forward, as the 225/50 tyres deliver a ton of grip. If the car does begin to deviate from the driver's desired line, well, GM's StabiliTrak is primed and ready. One of the things I really like about this G6 GTP is the fact that the dashboard doesn't look like it was cobbled together by a bunch of drunken sailors after a night on the beer. It really is very attractive, and it's logically laid out. The other huge advantage, well, right back here. You know, so many convertibles advertise themselves as being a four-seater. Well, of course, if you don't have any appendages, you might fit. This one, on the other hand, well, you can sit back here with comfort, even with the roof up. It really is a true four-seater. The same togetherness applies to the feedback from the steering, as the straight-ahead position is readily discernible and the weighting is nicely progressive as you turn off centre. The fact it is of the hydraulic variety and not the electric assist used in other G6s makes a world of difference. The brakes follow this lead, as the anti-lock system and four-wheel disc deliver strong fade-free stops that measure 41 metres from 100k. The lone gripe is with the pedal feel. It's spongy, and so it's difficult to modulate when tootling round town. You know, the beauty of owning a hardtop convertible is the fact that when the roof is up, you've got the comfort and security of a coupe, as well as a decent sized trunk. However, when you fold the whole lot down into here, you have to be very careful. Now, in this GTP, there's a plastic cover that tells you how much cargo you can carry. If it's sticking up like this, you and the hardtop are in trouble. The G6 GTP earns a 3.9 litre V6 that churns out 240 horsepower and a rewarding 241 pound-feet of torque at a low 2800 RPM. This makes motivating 1603 kilograms of automobile a snap. Mat the gas off the line and the tyres chirp until the traction control system reins in the stallions. It then romps forward, putting 100k on the clock in 7.2 seconds, which is commendably fast. It also means a strong mid-range and an overtaking time of 6.4 seconds. The slick shifting 4-speed automatic transmission supports the engine's low and mid-range work ethic nicely. It is true of GM's other trannies, and so it does not get much better in terms of shift quality. Mind you, I was left wondering how much sweeter this car would be if it followed the prevailing trend and had 5 or 6 speeds in its transmission. Off the top, I asked if this car was going to flourish or flop. Without question, it is going to flourish because it does so many things right. It's a delight to drive, the body is stiff enough to banish cowl shake, it's a realistic 4-seater, and it's finished better than just about any other Pontiac before it. But its overwhelming advantage, well, it comes in cost. For about $40,000, you get 2 cars for the price of 1, and the competition can't touch that bang for the buck.
There are a limited number of components that go into making this new invention, the tweel. But then once it's all made, it really is one single component. It's one mounted assembly. And you can compare this to the current pneumatic tire, in which we have basically 5 components. First you have the tire, then you have the wheel. You have to have air, you have a valve, and now we're adding a pressure monitor. So basically what we've invented here is one mounted assembly, which is one component that replaces 5 components.
This is a tweel, and it consists of a tread band, which is conventional tread rubber. It has a solid foundation so it can be easily retreaded, put different compounds on it. That's connected to a shear band, and that's the part that generates the contact pressure. That's the part that replaces the inflation pressure. That shear band is connected to a hub by means of flexible spokes, which you can see here. They transmit the load from the ground to the hub.
We took a Segway with specially designed tweels for that application and drove it off a 3-foot ledge. In the video you can see a very large deformation in the tweel, and then a complete rebound with no loss of performance. If the same type of maneuver had been done with a pneumatic tire mounted on a rigid wheel, there would have been danger of cracking the wheel or of damaging the tire.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President and CEO, Nissan Motor Company Limited, Carlos Ghosn.
This new 2007 G35 takes up where the original began, with a clear, unique vision. The first G opened the doorway to Infiniti for an entirely new group of performance luxury automobile buyers. Now, having set our own standard, it's time to push into the future with a completely rethought all-new G. The new G's vibrant design elevates its seductive yet athletic look to a higher level. Still simple, still sporty, there is an added sense of refinement and grace in details such as the headlights, taillights, the sculpted grille blades, and crisp character lines. Inside, the cabin combines technology and modern warmth. The welcoming interior is accentuated by the thoughtful use of modern and traditional design cues. The G's 4th generation VQ35 3.5-liter V6 features 80% redesigned parts, including new dual intake and dual exhaust systems, a higher redline, and 300 plus horsepower. With its unique style, craftsmanship, and performance, a line has again been drawn between the Infiniti G and traditional sports sedan.
The 2007 Acura RDX comes with a turbo. Now, some companies like Subaru like to put a scoop in the hood to direct air to the turbo, but Acura felt the boy racer image wasn't for them. So instead, just above the engine grille, the RDX has a front inlet that with ducting that directs cool air directly to the intercooler. Now, moving from performance to practical, the RDX comes with a privacy cover, but instead of trying to find a place to put it when you don't need it, this one fits nice and neatly into the floor with a plastic cover. Small thing, but a great idea. And speaking of guys with great ideas, let's head to the Quaker State Garage and join Bill Gardner.
Well, Brad, one great idea that motorists are clearly embracing is the reduction of scheduled maintenance intervals on modern cars. And over the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen a lot of scheduled maintenance intervals greatly increase. Spark plugs probably the most obvious ones, and I want to talk about that a little bit today. Now, people are pretty good in terms of doing the basic maintenance, oil changes and oil filters. I find that my customers and motorists in general pretty good about maintaining that. But some of the other intervals, i.e. tune-ups, spark plug replacement, servicing transmissions, etc., a lot of that stuff now is stretched so long that it's almost out of sight, out of mind. Many people aren't even keeping the car for that 160,000 kilometers, which is basically the first tune-up interval on many of these cars, or first spark plug replacement interval on many new cars. With platinum or iridium tipped spark plugs, 160K has become the norm, and that's happened gradually over the last 10 or 12 model years of cars, to the point now where people are just driving it till it drops, literally. Now, I've noticed some of my customers lately coming in with cars well in excess of 200,000K, one just the other day with 216K, and one last week with 225,000K, still with the original spark plugs in that vehicle. Now, the complaint in both cases was poor fuel economy. Car wasn't running quite as well as it used to, but amazingly both vehicles recently passed emission tests, so they weren't all that far out in left field. But there was definitely some improvement to be had by replacing the spark plugs. Now, there's a brand new platinum tip spark plug right there, and right here is one that came out of a vehicle with 216,000K on it. Now, when we look at them closely through the magnifying glass, we can see the ground electrode, paper thin, all cupped in the center and worn away. The little pad of platinum that used to be on the ground electrode is gone, and it's all eroded the ground electrode away. The gap is up to 75 thousandths of an inch, and fuel economy with this deal was pretty poor. Now, I can almost understand somebody forgetting to change spark plugs at 160K, and that quite often happens. Usually the only thing that suffers is fuel economy. But here's an example of something I found the other day that I just couldn't believe. I went to do a service call on a customer's vehicle, wouldn't start in an underground garage. I put a new battery in it, cleaned up the cables. When I fired the thing up, there was this awful rapping noise from the engine. Shut it off, checked the oil. There was enough oil on the dipstick, but it was awful looking oil, absolutely disgusting in terms of color and texture. And when I looked at the oil filter on the engine, it was all rusted out and actually leaking through the canister. It's unbelievable that an oil filter could be on the engine long enough to completely rust out the way this one had. But it certainly was the case. Changed the oil, changed the filter, and believe it or not, the engine sounded okay afterwards. That guy dodged a huge bullet. I don't even think he knows how lucky he got. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2006.
Success in any organization starts at the top, and you'd like to think that the top people in any company have a vague idea of what their product does. I mean, you'd like to think the president of Kodak knows how to use a camera. The president of a TV network might have some vague idea of how TV shows go together. And you might like to think that the top people in a car company would know how to drive. But it's not always true. I've been with an awful lot of car company executives whose only time spent in the car is in the back seat of a stretched limo, bashing away on their laptop or talking on their cell phones. Some of them can't even drive a manual transmission. There are exceptions. There may be a reason why BMWs handle so well. Every single one of their board of directors can really handle a car. I once chased Bernard Gushel, who's the head of R&D, down a twisty road in Italy, both of us driving Minis. That guy can really drive. The president of Ford, actually the chairman back in the 80s, Don Peterson, he went to the Bob Bondurant School of Racing in Arizona, really learned how to handle a car. And then when the suspension engineers for the Taurus came out and said, you know, we need 10 cents more of a bushing in the suspension to make this car handle properly, he said, go ahead, because he knew. Most executives would have said 90% of the customers couldn't tell a difference, so why bother? Peterson figured the 10% who do are the opinion leaders. They'll tell their friends this is a good car, and besides, you might as well appeal to the entire market instead of a subset of it. Guess what? Taurus became the best-selling car in the world. More recently, we heard the president of Honda is a former rally driver. An engineer was telling us he was out on a winter test on an icy skid pad, had the car totally sideways, plumes of ice spewing off of each of the tires. He jumps out of the car grinning like an assassin and says, good car. And that's why Hondas are good cars, because the people at the top care. If they don't have the emotion for the product, how can anybody else have it? I'm Jim Kenzie.
Naturally, Acura is hoping for big things from its new RDX. I mean, they sent their chief engineer, Gary Everett, to Japan for 2 years to oversee the project. And as we mentioned earlier, the RDX comes with Acura's first gasoline turbo to North America, and believe me, this turbo is seamless. Performance is outstanding. As for the design, well, it's not that I dislike it, but if you compare it to the Mazda CX-7, well, it does look a little conservative. And if you compare them both in price, well, price could be the deal breaker. But Acura is really looking at a car like the BMW X3 as its competition. And as for me, if I had to live with either one, I'd rather take the RDX simply because it's more car-like. Anyway, Graham will have a much closer look at this new RDX on a future program. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
It is really that attractive technology which is appropriate and which is usable for today and tomorrow.
TSN's Motoring 2006 has been brought to you by the new Q from Quaker State. Unleash all your horses. And Michelin, a better way forward.